Hello everybody and welcome to Yeovil bus station. Now over the next 2 days I'm going to be sampling the Dorset core bus routes. I've wanted to do this for ages and I have finally managed to free up the time to be able to do it. Now it is a bit of a pain doing this because ideally I wanted to do a loop. I wanted to go from Yeovil to Dorset on the CR5, yep, that was perfect. Then across the Blandford Forum on the CR9 or CR8, yeah, that was perfect, I got the CR9. And then I wanted to get the CR7 up to Shaftesbury, yep, that was absolutely brilliant, and you'll see why later in the video. And then it got to Shaftesbury, oh yep, there's a CR2M across to Gillingham, that'd be lovely. Of course, the CR3 bus, which would pretty much complete the loop between Gillingham and Sturmwich to Newton, leaves 20 minutes before the CR2M arrives into Gillingham. Why would you not just hold it for an extra 20 minutes? It's absolutely stupid. And basically the CR3 has been the bus causing all of the problems in this video and has been the bus with the most cruddest timetable out of all of these, apart from the CR9 maybe, but at least I could actually do that one. So in the end I had to split it into 2 days and spend like £5 or £6 on a train ticket. Honestly, it was pretty awful. Anyway, here I'm at Yeovil bus station doing the first part of this adventure, which would tick off the CR4 and CR3 bus routes. I'm going to be taking the CR4 operated by First Bus Somerset, previously the buses of Somerset, and I believe this route has had a number of First Bus operators such as First Wessex, as well as South West coaches when they operated it under the X10 along the route. I'm going to be taking this to Sturmwich to Newton, and unfortunately I got a right street light. At least it was a bus, I suppose. Anyway, here you can see plenty of buses here at Yeovil bus station. During the day, there is quite a hive of activity here. However, if you come here on a weekend, even worse on a Sunday, there are like pretty much no buses. Here I am leaving Yeovil bus station a few minutes late, which was absolutely brilliant for my connection since I had 45 minutes in Sturmwich to Newton, and well, there's not really much to do there, or at least not from my point of view. There was probably a few shops I could go and see, but they were a little way away from the main bus station area. As you can see, they're currently doing a lot of work to the old Lovers Walk shopping centre and the area around that, which involves demolishing part of the bus station. I do believe that they're going to put in a new waiting room and toilet, and I presume they're going to reinstate the bays for local buses that were previously located where they have now demolished a shopping centre. Hopefully they will, because at the moment the bus station gets quite congested, especially since there are a lot of buses that arrive and depart at exactly the same time for absolutely no reason. Anyway, here I am now, leaving the outskirts of Yeovil by Penmill railway station. Here I am departing Sherborne Greenhill. Sherborne is quite a nice town, although it is rather small and there isn't really much to do. It's quite nice to walk through. As you'll find out later in the video, things didn't really go that much to plan. Anyway, Sherborne gets a pretty good bus service as both CR4 and 58 services alternate to give a roughly hourly service to Sherborne, as well as places between Yeovil and Henstridge. After Henstridge, the route split off and the frequency becomes every 2 hours, which isn't great, but it's better than what the CR3 can offer, let's put it that way. As well as that, if you live around the back of Sherborne, near the railway station, and you can't be bothered to make the 10-minute walk to Greenhill, the CR5 service a couple of times a day also serves that area. Here I am arriving into Sturminster Newton car park, which is the main bus station area. It only has one bus stop here, and there is a small canopy located next to the toilets, which is quite useful, especially when the drivers do have a short changeover or break here. However, I do wish there's a little bit more to do right next to the bus stop, as the town centre is a short walk away. I think it's about 5 minutes away. Anyway, after 47420, that is the first bus vehicle that I was on, leaves to head off to Blandford Forum. It is a nearly 2-hour trek from Yeovil, so I feel very, very sorry for anybody doing the full route. My next bus arrives on the CR3 route, the route that has been plaguing me the most. And well, this kind of made up for it. On this particular journey, I had the South West Coaches Volvo B7RLE Claxton Centro, the only one in their fleet, and it was quite nice inside, but do not sit on the very back seats. In the end, I decided to move because they were so uncomfortable. I believe this was built by Alexander Dennis, but because for some reason they own Claxton now, the bus is branded as a Claxton Centro. I'm not too sure. Things get a little bit confusing whether or not this was an ADL bus branded as a Claxton bus, or if this is actually a Claxton bus just before ADL rebranded themselves and made Claxton their coach firm. It's quite confusing here. I believe this is the successor of the Claxton Primo, which was basically a shorter version and more troublesome version of this particular bus. Anyway, here I am turning around at the small bus loop located just next to Sturminster Newton car park, and here I am heading towards Gillingham. Here I am passing through one of the many villages along the CR3 route. I'm not too sure which one it was, but it was possibly Stour Provost. I'm not too sure. Earlier on in the trip, I passed through Marnhull on this CR3 bus. Unfortunately, the reason why I couldn't do the loop in the opposite direction, that means using the CR4 first to go to Sturminster Newton, then Gillingham, then Shaftesbury, and working my way around, finishing at Dorchester last, is because the CR4 route no longer serves Marnhull. I understand why. It's quite a complicated section of the route, and if there was a road closure, it meant that the diversion was really complicated, and overall it wasn't very nice for the drivers. However, it does mean that Marnhull now gets a less good bus service, although not many people use the bus service here anyway, but it meant I couldn't make the connection I had in my really old schedule from like a year ago when I planned this. So yeah, that wasn't great, and it meant I couldn't do it in a day. Anyway, that's enough of me waffling on. here I am arriving into Gillingham town centre on this amazing Volvo B7 RLE. Here I am arriving into Gillingham station. This is Gillingham, Dorset, instead of Gillingham, Kent. Just bear that in mind, just in case you are that dumb. Now, from here onwards, I got the train back to Yeovil, but you can change here for other bus services, both operated by South West Coaches and Froome Bus. I'm not too sure if Salisbury Red serve here or not. I believe they sometimes do. Whether or not they serve the railway station, I'm not too sure. However, the main route that serves here, other than the CR3, which, well, to be honest, isn't a main route, is the CR2 and CR2M, which gives an incredibly good bus service. And, well, looking at this Volvo B8 RLE MCV Evolution, I can see why. This bus was absolutely packed, so it's a good job they run it quite frequently. I believe it runs between every 30 minutes to an hour, depending on whether or not it is a CR2 or CR2M. Anyway, I will see you tomorrow, or, well, in your case, in a few seconds, where I am back at Yeovil bus station, heading on to the CR5 bus service. And oh, just before I leave Gillingham, here is a 6-pot Optare Solo. I absolutely love these things.
Exeter St David's. This train has 6 carriages. Some stations have short platforms. If you are travelling to Fenton or Wimpole, you will need to travel in the front 3 carriages of the train. Train stops in zones 6 and 1. First class and down to zones 6 and 1.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Yeovil bus station a few days after I went on the CR4 and CR3 bus routes. Today I'm going to be completing the bus loop and I'll be starting with the CR5 service. I'll be taking it to its extreme and I will be using it to its full length, as I will be riding it between Yeovil and Dorchester, pretty much end to end, as I got off at Dorchester South railway station. Now sometimes you get an Optare Versa on here, however unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I got one of the ADL Enviro 200s. This is one of the mini versions, but I believe because it was built in 2014 and it's after a certain date, I can't particularly remember what that date was, so I do apologise, it is not classified as an Enviro 200 Dart, but I could be wrong. I was quite thankful I had an E200 though, as much as I like Optare Versas. Both an Enviro 200 and an Optare Versa are better than some of the streetlights that often plague this route. Anyway, here I am departing Yeovil bus station, which is located right next to the demolition site of the Glover's Walk shopping centre. This bus was quite knackered, and to be honest it probably would have been better off being demolished. No, I'm just joking on that one, this bus was pretty decent actually. part of the route along Henford was closed. Here I am passing through the beautiful Sherborne town centre. Here I am passing by Sherborne railway station. I think it's pretty good that the CR5 stops here, since it's the only bus that serves Sherborne railway station, but then again there's also a not great reason, which I would find out about a little bit later on my return journey to Yeovil. Here I am passing a longer and a 2 years older ADL Enviro 200 going in the opposite direction on the CR5 heading towards Yeovil. I believe that bus is actually located and stored at their Yeovil bus depot, whereas the bus I'm currently on is actually stored at South West Coach's Portland depot. I could be wrong on that though. Here I am turning around in either Charlton Down or Charminster. The area around Charminster gets a little bit confusing and I can't actually remember which place this was, if it was Charlton Down or Charminster. Oh god everybody, I'm only 15 and I'm getting dementia already. Here I am arriving into Dorchester South Station, which would be where I alight the bus since it's the final stop. I was going to get off the bus in Dorchester Town Centre, but I decided to get off at Dorchester South Station as I wanted to see what happened to the building above the Costa which burned down. It turns out they've tried to repair it and the Costa is reopening soon. From then on, I decided to walk into Dorchester Town Centre since I had a 2-hour layover. I could have gotten the CR8 to Blandford Forum and had 2 hours there, which actually might have been a better thing than having 2 hours in Dorchester. But I wanted to go on the CR9 since it is a more obscure route. And the only reason why I was won over by the CR8, or almost anyway, in the end I did decide on the CR9, is because I had a double decker. Then again it was a Scania Omni-City. So in the end, I did go with the CR9, since it's more obscure and heads over towards Puddletown and Bare Regis, which I don't believe the CR8 does. Anyway, here I am exploring Dorchester Town Centre and its many dungy and dark alleyways. Honestly, I don't know whose idea it was to install these things, it's just awful. And they were doing up the high street. The town centre itself was pretty good, apart from the fact it was full up of old people. Honestly, I barely saw any young people at all. The youngest people I saw were the blimmin' bus drivers. Everybody else was old and using a bus pass. Anyway, after spending 2 hours in Dorchester, it actually went by quite fast, so I'm not really complaining that much. here's my next bus arriving on the CR9, which is a newer Damery ADL Enviro 200. Yes, I have pronounced Damery correctly. I've always pronounced it Damery, but apparently that's wrong, so there we go. Anyway, this Enviro 200 was quite new, and it was actually very nice. The seats were extremely comfortable. It had seat belts, presumably because it sometimes does school services, but it also had announcements and destination screens inside the bus, which I thought was absolutely amazing. Anyway, here I'm departing bang on time at 12:50, heading towards Blandford Forum via Bear Regis.
Next stop, Brewery Square.
Here I am leaving Dorchester town centre. The road we are currently going on isn't a very well used or very popular corridor, hence why the CR9 along with the one or two other routes are the only routes that follow along this corridor. Here I am speeding along the A35, which we use many times along the route. Here I am passing through Puddletown, along with Bear Regis, Dorchester at one end and Blandford Forum at the other end. This is one of the major calling points along the route, and it's not exactly a large place. After passing through Tolpuddle and trundling along the lovely roads around this area, which are extremely scenic, here I am arriving into the last major final calling point, which is Bear Regis. After this, it was speeding along the main road towards Blandford Forum, only serving a handful of much smaller villages. Here I am arriving into Blandford St Mary, which is located on the outskirts of Blandford Forum, and it's where a large Tesco is located. Now I was a bit concerned here because my next bus, the CR7, wasn't actually here, but once I went into Blandford Forum and waited a bit outside the Crown Hotel, it did eventually show up, and it was just what I hoped for. Anyway, there was another Damery Scania Omnicity arriving, along with another First Bus Somerset right streetlight on the CR4. Anyway, here I am arriving into Blandford Forum, right in the town centre. The town itself is pretty beautiful, but in my opinion there's not much to do here, especially for people like me who like buses where there's not really that many buses. There are a few to keep you occupied though. There goes that Enviro 200 I was just on, heading back to Dorchester. That bus didn't have a very long turnaround time at all in Blandford Forum, so it was quite good that he was on time really. And I didn't have very long to wait either until my next and probably the best bus out of all of the buses today arrived into Blandford Forum. This was one of Damery's two Dennis Dart MPD Plaxton Pointer 2 buses, and it still has some stickers and relics from its old Southern Vectis days on the Isle of Wight. Anyway, here I am departing Blandford Forum on the CR7 towards Shaftesbury. Here I am passing through Compton Abbas, at least I think it was. Now if you're around my age, that is 15, and you want to travel on buses with me, or at least around the West Country, I can't really go no further than the bottom of Devon or top of North Somerset or Bristol, just give me a shout, because I've been feeling kind of lonely recently. I am looking for a girlfriend who likes trains and buses, but that seems to be going nowhere at the moment. But I did do this adventure with my dad, and often when I do things like this, which are a little bit too far for me to go on my own, then, well, it's kind of fun to do it with other people, like my dad. We both had a good laugh on this start, and we both enjoyed it very much. And I'd just like to say thank you to whoever at Damery thought it was a good idea to have this dart out for the entire day on the CR7. Honestly, it was absolutely amazing, this bus, especially since it still has Southern Vector stickers on it. Here I am passing through another village. Maybe this was Compton Abbas. I'm not really too sure. I've kind of lost track of all of these villages. I've been through so many recently. Here I am arriving into Shaftesbury town centre. It's quite an isolated town, but the bus service here is reasonably good, and it does have a good rail connection, which is located at Gillingham, and I'll be using that bus to rail connection later on, or pretty much next to be honest. However, first, let's explore some of Shaftesbury as I walk between the Town Hall and Bell Street car park, because for some reason, the CR2 bus, my next bus, doesn't actually serve the Town Hall, which is where the rest of the bus services leave and arrive at. Here's my next bus at Shaftesbury Town Hall before departing and doing a short loop around the town. This is a lovely 6-pot Optare Solo, operated by South West Coaches, and I absolutely loved it. Here is the Dennis Star MPD Claxton Pointer 2 I just arrived on, heading back towards Blandford on the CR7 service. Here I am passing by Morrison's Daily, on my walk to the toilet and then to Bell Street car park. I didn't really think much of Shaftesbury, although it is quite a famous and very prestigious place, and to be fair it does look quite nice, but in my opinion this 6-pot Optare Solo looks nice and it definitely sounded nicer. I also quite like that South West Coaches have put poppies on the front of all of their, or most of their buses, at least all of the buses that I went on operated by them, since I think it's some sort of Remembrance Day coming up soon. I'm not really too sure with it. Anyway, here I am leaving Shaftesbury, Bell Street car park on the CR2M service towards Gillingham, which operates via Mottcombe. Here I am turning off the main road, which I presume this normal CR2 service operates along, heading into Mottcombe, which is why this route is actually called the CR2M, with the M standing for Mottcombe. Now I presumed we would just go straight through the village and rejoin the main road somewhere up near Gillingham. However, we ended up doing a loop around the village and coming back down this road, which is both good and bad. It was a little bit repetitive, but at the same time it allowed for some great thrash. Here I am passing through Lotzcombe. I found it quite strange, this village, as there is a mixture of old and new houses. There's a lot of old houses, but at the same time there are a lot of new, like, 3-storey houses here, even though it's just a tiny little village. Very, very strange, but at least it gets quite a good bus service, unless you want to use the buses on a Sunday, which in that case it gets no bus service, which I think isn't very good. I think the CR2 is one of only 1 or 2 other South West Coaches bus routes that should run on a Sunday, but I suppose it is all down to driver and bus availability. Here I am arriving into Gillingham once again. Just before I boarded the train back towards Sherborne this time, not Yeovil. I would end up back at Yeovil, but it ended up being slightly quicker to head off to Sherborne. I had a very, very nice ham and cheese toastie in the Costa here in Gillingham, so thumbs up to the people operating at Costa in Gillingham town centre. Anyway, here is my train arriving into Gillingham, which was a 6-coach class 159. Now hopefully quite soon, or you might have already seen it if I put these videos out in the wrong order, you will hopefully see, or might have seen, the video I made in Southampton with the Dennis Trident Opter Olympuses. On the way towards Southampton, I only had a 3-coach class 159, so I'm kind of glad that this one was a 6-coach one. That doesn't mean it wasn't busy, it was absolutely packed. Here I am arriving into Sherborne, where I have a bit of a dilemma. Now this train was due in at 5:06, and the CR5, which has recently had a new timetable implemented to help the service connect with the train, I quote that, to help it connect with the train, is due at 5:05, and it's not even supposed to wait for the train. It is absolutely stupid. Therefore the bus went straight by the station just as I pulled in, since the barriers at the level crossing opened as soon as we pulled into the station, and therefore I missed the CR5. So, South West Coaches, surely you must have more sense than that. You have some pretty good buses and you're usually on time. Surely somebody somewhere at your operation must have some more sense. Like, surely it would make sense to have the CR5 bus wait here for 5 minutes, just so passengers who are already on the bus can connect with the train, passengers on the train can get off and connect to the bus. Anyway, because I missed the CR5 bus because I had a -1 minute connection, and well, it was pretty much a 0-minute connection. Here I am walking back through Sherborne Town Centre at 5:10 in the evening. And to be fair, I actually felt kind of safe here. I actually quite liked the place, and I felt safer walking through here than what I did walking through my hometown, put it that way. Anyway, here I am at the bus stop. Once again, this is Sherborne Greenhill from my final bus, which would once again be the CR4. This time I have an Enviro 200. Here I am now back at Yeovil bus station at about 20 to 6 in the evening. This was a very long day, and therefore this video is probably going to be quite long. And as the CR4 goes back presumably to the depots, I think that was one of the last CR4 journeys of the day. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone! Maybe it wasn't the best idea to say my age in this video. Oh well.